Hi, and welcome to the Beyond the Falls podcast. Today I've got Eric Henjum with Henjum Appraisal. He's an appraiser in the area, and welcome to the podcast, Eric.
Thanks, Sarah.
I'm glad you can be here. I think it's a big part of writing an offer and going through the home buying process or the home selling process, so I'm excited for you to share your knowledge with us.
All right.
First of all, I'd like to ask, what's your connection to River Falls? Tell me a little bit about what brought you here.
Sure. Well, I came here in the mid-90s to go to the university and pretty much never left. Met my wife here and bought our first house in town in 2001. Got a couple boys that are in 8th grade and 10th grade. And yeah, we just really like the community.
Yeah. It's a great place to live, that's for sure.
It is.
What interested you in becoming an appraiser? What inspired you?
I don't know if it was an inspiration, but I used to work in more of a seasonal business, kind of in some sales, and things were really slow in the wintertime, and so I was looking for something else to kind of diversify into. Took the appraisal coursework back in like the early 2000s, and then got my license in 2003 and started doing appraisal work part-time, but then slowly pretty quickly that kind of took over and just got doing that full-time, and have been at it ever since.
Awesome. Yeah. For those that don't know, because I think there's different parts like of an offer that you're writing, and I think there's sometimes confusion between an appraiser versus an inspector.
Sure.
That's just a common.
Yep.
That's just common when I meet with new buyers. That's a common. They get confused by the two. So, what is the role of an appraiser?
That's a great question.
Say in a purchase.
Sure. That's a great question, and it is good to kind of differentiate between a home inspection and a home appraisal. Yep. So, and I'm not a home inspector, but when I think about a home inspection, that's going to be an inspection where someone's going to come out to the property, look over everything. But they're doing more of a kind of a investigation into the mechanicals and the components, and looking more at the operation and function of everything, whereas the appraiser is going to come out to the property, take a look at everything, take measurements, take generally a lot of photographs, but then they're looking at the property from more of a marketability point to determine a value for the property, as opposed to a home inspection looking at more potential, like just defects, the condition, potential repairs, that kind of thing. And in some instances, I will point out some of those same kind of things, but then I'm going to also assign a value to the property.
Yep. And we want, if you're writing an offer, ideally,
Yep.
if I'm writing an offer for my client, I want the appraised value to match that offer price or be higher.
Sure. Ideally, but on the other hand, like, you want to make sure your buyers are going to get a fair deal also.
Yep.
And so potentially, if the appraised value were to come out lower, I mean, it's not always a bad thing.
Right.
It can potentially save somebody from making a bad investment, or it can, because maybe there's some things that the appraiser noticed that just weren't really obvious in the time that you spent at the property.
Yeah, and you are there. How long does an appraisal take, like on average? Because when I go do a showing, we're there for maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I would say that, so the time that I actually spend at a given property will vary greatly depending on, same as with you, the size and just how much there is to see. And I could sometimes be in a property it could be as quick as 20 minutes, or it could be an hour and 20 minutes or more, depending on the property. But really, most of my time would be spent working more on the report and analyzing the market, searching for comparables, the reporting aspect of it, more in front of a computer screen rather than the on-site inspection. The on-site inspection is generally more of the data gathering and that kind of thing.
Sure.
So.
Yep. So you kind of mentioned the market. You're studying the market as well. Do you think, so I know we're in a low inventory market, do you think inventory and, we have in the last 2 years seen higher interest rates, now they're starting to trickle down. Do you think rates and inventory, how does that affect the value of a home?
Sure, I think that typically you would think that higher interest rates would potentially decrease demand and decrease have some decreasing impact maybe on sale prices. I would say that the River Falls market had been in such a long-term like shortage in terms of the supply and demand side of things that even the higher interest rates over the last couple of years really didn't diminish our demand very much in our market areas. And overall in general for most properties in River Falls have continued to appreciate pretty steadily even over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I just read a stat. Last year at this time, our average single family previously owned home was about $378,000. This year we're at roughly $405,000. So seeing that steady increase, and that's actually surprising, I think, with options and rates.
Yeah, it is a little bit atypical when you think about the market, the other market factors in terms of just interest rates, that we didn't really see any kind of a downturn in pricing, but River Falls is a good place to live.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned that you kind of are inspecting the home too, and there are some things that you might see that an inspector might see. And I know I've learned over the years there's certain items that you're gonna, maybe put a flag on it based on loan type.
Sure.
So could you kind of quick talk about maybe if you're a buyer with maybe a VA loan, a USDA loan, an FHA loan, what kinds of things, what additional items should we be looking at walking through a property to maybe prevent a red flag down the road so we can ensure a smooth process?
Yep, well, that's a great question because it's nice to have everything covered up front when we come out for that appraisal and we don't have to call for any kind of repairs.
Yep.
And those particular loan programs that you referred to as far as the VA, FHA, USDA, they do tend to be a little bit more stringent and have some different property eligibility requirements than say a conventional loan or something that maybe is just a loan with like a local bank or a credit union. And so the biggest issues that I would run into with some of those federal guaranteed programs would be related to defective paint surfaces. Mm-hmm. It's unlikely nowadays that any of this defective or peeling, chipping paint is lead-based paint since that's been over 40 years. But it's still a requirement for those loan programs. And so if you have sellers that are looking at a property that has any kind of like chipping, worn, peeling paint surfaces, and it unfortunately extends to, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but it extends to basically any structures on that property. So it would be the main dwelling, a garage, a shed, outbuildings, barns, decks, even fences that are on the property. Oh. And so, different appraisers may interpret that a little bit differently, but all those areas we'd want to have them painted ahead of time and not have that be an issue. Or it could be something that's not the end of the world, but it's generally a repair item where somebody would have to make that repair and then the appraiser comes back out again to verify the work has been completed. There's been some changes where some lending programs are allowing an agent or even a homeowner to provide evidence that the work has been completed. Okay. But the bottom line is that can kind of slow the process down. Yep. So that'd be the number one thing I see with those type of loan programs. The number two thing would be, since we're sort of in a semi-rural area where you've got a lot of properties that are in the outlying township areas on acreage sites, that the setback distances between like the well and the septic systems on properties. Yep. And so because the FHA and VA distance requirements are actually more stringent than like the state code. And so sometimes you run into some issues with that. Typically though, that can be taken care of if we can get like a site map ahead of time even. Sometimes if you have a seller who, especially if it's a newer system that's been installed, maybe we have like some kind of a permit or something, with sanitary permit, you can have a ready for the appraiser or some kind of a map of where those items are located. That can be helpful.
It's good.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare that those are going to be like the property is completely ineligible for financing, but sometimes it's just some extra hoops to jump through. Yep.
Yeah. I want to kind of flip things over from purchasing to like, if I'm a seller looking at getting my house ready to sell.
Sure.
what are the improvements that are going to show the biggest jump in value on your home? What would you suggest if I'm or just a homeowner? You don't have to be
Sure.
selling your home, but what's going to bring the most value if I want to improve my home?
Well, I mean, it's just a super cliche answer, but kitchens and bathrooms are probably the biggest bang for your buck with a property.
Yep.
But really, a lot of other little cosmetic things that people can do, and in some cases, homeowners can do on their own too.
Yep.
The new LVP, luxury vinyl planking flooring, has become really popular, not only in new construction, but in just like remodeling jobs.
Yep.
And a lot of those products install pretty easily. That's something that people can do. Fresh coat of paint, I do think it makes it somewhat of a difference.
Yep.
Even some new like light fixtures, things like that. It's hard to say that they're going to add, how much exact value all those items add, but they definitely, I think, add to the overall appeal of the property.
Yeah. Awesome. Do materials make a difference? Like if I'm putting in new countertops, does it matter if I did laminate? Would you, or granite, or does the material matter to you guys?
Well, I think it does matter. Again, it's one of those situations where if we're comparing the subject house to a series of different comparable properties, it's difficult to make a specific adjustment in most cases for,
Sure.
say, a granite or quartz countertop versus a vinyl countertop for that individual item.
Yep.
But as we group a property, look at a property as a whole, you start thinking about, okay, does this have a solid surface material in the kitchen and the bathrooms, and is there backsplash? And you talk about different types of upgraded flooring maybe, or cabinetry, and all of a sudden that property can kind of be elevated to almost a different quality of construction category than
Sure.
a more basic home. And then
Yep.
for sure that would necessitate some type of adjustment.
Okay. It's good to know. Let's see. I was also going to ask.
Excuse me.
Yeah. No, since I didn't before, if I just wanted to have you come out and give me a value. Now, it's different than me coming out to give a CMA on
Yep.
the property, but you are open to that, right? Like that's something.
Sure.
Anyone could call you, contact you, have you come out and give a value
Yep,
of their home.
absolutely. There's lots of different reasons. We've been just discussing appraisals for lending purposes,
Yep.
but there's a lot of different reasons that I would perform an appraisal for somebody.
Yeah.
I would say that a lot of them are in the lending realm, and like what you're almost referring to maybe is almost like a pre-listing type of an appraisal, because maybe you met with a potential seller and like maybe they have an idea of what the property value is going to be worth, and maybe you have a recommendation, and maybe there's a little bit of a gap between those two figures, and you might think, well, let's have a third party come out and give us an independent opinion.
Yep.
And so that would be what we would consider sort of like a pre-listing appraisal, where I would come in and not split the difference, but just give another opinion as to what we think would be the way to sell this property.
Yep.
So that's one. And like other than the still in the real estate or the financing realm would be for refinance transactions, but we talk about like private appraisal assignments for like, unfortunately, like for divorce,
Yep.
estates, trusts, things of that nature.
Yep.
Yep.
And how much does an appraisal cost?
It's a good question. So I would say that depending on the property type and the complexity of the property, what's being done, if it's a more basic, like even potentially a drive-by type of an appraisal versus a more full inspection, probably in like the $400 to $600 range.
Okay.
It varies. It certainly can be more. It could be a little bit less, potentially depending on the scope of the assignment. If it's maybe something where you did an analysis from your office as opposed to going out to the property.
Yeah.
But yeah, it varies. Now, homeowners sometimes will see a figure that's higher because there's also, for most lending transactions, there's an appraisal management company that's involved in the process that
Yep.
acts as like a third-party intermediary between myself and the lender, and they'll usually take a cut of the overall appraisal cost.
Yep.
And so when like your buyers or sellers get a closing statement, the amount of that is being charged for their appraisal is not always reflected to what is just getting paid to the appraiser.
Right.
So
That's
yeah.
good to know.
Yeah, so I mean, it wouldn't be uncommon you could have someone see a fee of, $800.
Yep.
doesn't mean that that's all going to the individual appraiser.
Yep. Before we kind of wrap up here, is there anything else you want to share with us that you can think of?
That I can think of. Not really.
Not really? Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, just any other thoughts you have?
No, it's fun to talk to you. I know I've consulted with you too on especially like unique properties, and it's really nice to have the opinion of an appraiser. Especially like the situation you just mentioned as bouncing off two ideas.
Sure.
Two price points maybe, or just getting that third opinion. It's valuable, and I appreciate you and what you do.
Yeah, well, yep, likewise for me. I mean, I run into odd situations also where it's just nice to be able to have sort of some different resources in the industry to bounce ideas off of.
Yep.
So yeah,
absolutely.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us.
Great.
And we'll see you on the next episode of Beyond the Falls.